graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine. Yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves.
Okay, so I'm going to move towards the government now, and I'm thinking, okay, pre 94, post 95 legislators. There was a lot of movement then in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Not to go into history, but I'm now looking at it. You're saying, okay, I come from Soweto, and I'm thinking tribal. Do you think some of it has to do with some of the pre-colonial tribal heritage norms and cultures and clusters and beliefs, and post? Because if you were to look at your research and to look at the people that are there specifically, what is the dominant tribe and what is the minor tribe, for example? Does that also indicate an element of this tribe is literally picked on? Because we've realized that we're a violent society, specifically in Gauteng. Is that the case? Do you think? I'm sure you didn't look at this as well, but I'm just thinking, is there more work for the government to sit down and say, actually, we've still got our own little challenges that we haven't really addressed? We can point fingers, but we are pointing back.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, with regards to tribes, I'll dwell on more African identifying people in terms of the demographics of South Africa. We looked at, well, we had to translate a questionnaire in the quantitative phase to be Zulu. Now, how we came up with Zulu was that a majority of the population in Gauteng were Zulu or Zulu speakers according to census data, So it could have then, yeah, but
By the way, we're not saying Zulu people are violent.
No, not
It's
really.
just the data.
It was just about the fact that if we can look at English, for example, I'm not English, but for the sake of life going on, education and stuff, I would then converse in English. But I found that a lot of people, second to English, speak Zulu. Now, we did ask their home languages, but majority of them spoke Zulu. Now, it then made sense to then disseminate a Zulu questionnaire in order to get the data from the people who cannot speak English or read or write English, because then ethically it would have been incorrect. They would be filling up documents that they don't understand. So I'd be basically a thief, But when it comes to the pre-colonial impact, as sad as it may sound, I found that the cause of the violence and the patterns of the violence, if an emergency care provider is more likely to be attacked in middle and low income communities, which are predominantly Black, then we need to find out, why are those communities predominantly Black? Now, we found that one of the causes of violence is frustration with the government. So frustration with government services, frustration with a lack of job opportunities, leads to communities actually attacking an ambulance owned by the government in order for the government to hear what they are saying. However, it is how can I put it? It is a vicious cycle, because those very same people, the research also showed that they don't have money for transport. So if an ambulance does not come to them, they cannot call for an Uber, they cannot get a taxi. They cannot afford to ask a neighbor to assist. They probably don't have cars because they are low income earners, you know. They don't have access to hospitals, so healthcare because of that. Now, the data also showed, I don't know if you know, but in South Africa, we have a two-tiered healthcare system, as I told you. But what is more concerning is not the two-tier healthcare system. It's that your lifespan as a white man or white female in South Africa is actually more than that of a black man. So it means that racial disparities exist deeper than we think, because now you have easy access to health facilities as a Caucasian than as a black South African. So then it means that your quality of life is better than that of a black South African. So now, if you can look at the UK, for example, you look at their data, they only have one lifespan or estimated age before you can pass away. The term is actually running away from me because I have so much thoughts in my mind. But if you can look at that, if you don't get an accident or there's no preventable cause of death, when would you die a peaceful death? Now, in South Africa, there's actually two average lifespans, that of a white South African and a black South African. Now, we do understand why. The reason for that is the fact that the healthcare system is split. But before we get to the healthcare system, we need to look at the legacy of apartheid. We need to look at why are people confined to townships such as Soweto, Soshanguve, Mamelodi, whatever. Why are they confined there? And it's through the Land Redistribution Act of 19 whatever that moved them to these communities. But 100 and something years later, they are still there, and they are still having that gap of inequality, you know. But then, you know, when you put a rat inside a cage, it tends to want to scratch, to want to come out, you know. You have this vicious cycle where people destroy. So you have little, but you want to take your point across, but you destroy the little that you have instead of protecting what you have to try and get more, you know. And that is what's happening. And you'd see then that the causes are as in plain sight: poverty, inequality, exclusion, unemployment, frustration with the government because there's a lack of services. All those causes are the root causes of workplace violence, which are inherited from the apartheid era.
Okay, so let's go post, which is we've got legislators, they've all sat there. I mean, you know, there's so much that we can thank Nelson Mandela for, what he's done. Now we have Ramaphosa, and you know, he's there. So current situ, we know that the legislations need a revamp, a facelift. You've got 3 minutes based on your research findings to state your pitch, basically stating why we need the revamp, why it's important, just based on everything that we've discussed currently. So I'm literally giving you 3 minutes to speak to the government. No repercussions, government.
Basically, what I found is that
Or do you want to call Josie?
Yeah. my 10 minutes of protest, I'll use it. What we found in the research is that there has been no punishment, no reforms, no nothing. So if now we look at the consequences, so we use the one of my theoretical frameworks was the theory of criminal behavior, the broken windows theory of criminal behavior. Now, basically, in a nutshell, it says that crime flourishes in a community that doesn't deal with the petty crimes. So now, if we look at the consequences, who has ever been arrested or barred from using facilities that has committed these crimes? And the answer is no one, because if you attack a paramedic, it's seen as attacking anyone. It's not seen as gender-based violence. It's not seen as anything. We cannot say it's better. We don't say we are activating 72 hours plans because it's an attack on a police officer. Now, we need legislation to move towards the level of classifying the crimes against paramedics as crimes towards like infrastructure and crimes that impede on people's human rights. Because once you attack a paramedic, you are saying to those that must access the service that they can't access their basic human right, which is the right to health. So now let us increase the litigation aspect of it. Let us increase the sentencing. Let us prioritize these crimes. If I look at the issue of investigating these crimes, it cannot sit in a file with another crime. It cannot be classified as just another crime or another contact crime or just another robbery. It needs to have certain priority because it is causing a lot of impact. Now, legislation must focus firstly on that aspect. And then there's another issue of legislation, which is important. Now, we do understand that paramedics and emergency care providers cannot have weapons for protection. However, legislation can be looked at that they do have means to defend themselves, and legislation should look at means for them to be able to train to defend themselves and to be able to carry certain weapons once they are trained in order to defend themselves in these communities. And the last part of legislation that we want is legislation that will enable equipment that is being robbed to have some sort of tracking system or to be listed somewhere to curb the trading of this equipment. Because if you were to steal equipment in an ambulance, there has to be a buyer somewhere. Now, how do we curb that? Instead of just saying you have stolen property, it has to be stolen medical property or stolen something which carries a harsher penalty than just having stolen property. So I think legislation should look into those aspects. And I guess one of the things that we noted with the police cohort that we interviewed is that the police lacks the capacity to fully protect emergency care providers because they are also protecting themselves, funny enough, So we need some sort of solution with regards to protection. Now, apart from having weapons, we need a dedicated team that can just deal with these crimes, whether it's a task team, whether it's a permanent team. I guess that would be okay.
Wow, I mean, that's a lot. I didn't expect that. So thank you very much. And it's very insightful. And you've highlighted a lot of challenges that people are facing day to day. So I guess before we round off is, the main things that I heard in terms of advice or future recommendations is that lack of education is a challenge, and that we still have people, even though, as you said, with English, it's the language that we use to communicate globally easily. However, some people, due to lack of education, coming from a poverty-stricken background, they cannot. So I'm just thinking, to get a job then, when you can't speak English, to work in a bank, how do you? Because you still need to communicate. So it's quite troublesome. So we need more funding for individuals to be able to go into education. So that's what I heard. And then in terms of weapons, now understanding South Africa, and I will use South Africa as a female, is very vulnerable. To then say we should all have guns, I think where we are in terms of violence and death, specifically with guns, I think maybe a different idea. Maybe a legislation towards people actually owning guns at home. Maybe. Maybe towards that, but that's just my suggestion. And then the final one, which is so important, is that you've come to learn and to realize that these communities, they need a voice. And my understanding is that the government, please, whoever's there, have a look and listen to what we've discussed, and hopefully there'll be a change. I guess the final thing that I will ask pertaining to your research is, how does your research benefit, the wider community in Gauteng? And I think you've touched on it, but specific to Gauteng, how does it actually benefit them?
I think, when you have like, I call it simply an open secret. So we know something is happening, but we never quite discuss it. So it brought to light, when you look at certain challenges that I, as an emergency care provider who has worked in Gauteng, I realized that we have perceptions about the government ambulances are always late, the government ambulances are this and that, and we don't really get the gist as people as to why are they late and why are they afraid to come into this community, because to wait for a police escort takes time. Now, this research would then be able to firstly educate the community that sometimes their actions are the ones that lead to ambulances being late. Sometimes their actions are the ones that lead to emergency care providers not being able to provide the quality that's required, because they are also trying to fend for their lives while trying to fend for your life as a person requiring emergency care. Now, the other thing is that it serves as a document that would inform policymakers and legislators and people who actually have the power to actually know what are the challenges, what are the causes, and what are the probable solutions, and evidence-based solutions, not just solutions. And it will also increase the body of knowledge, because I guess out of all the research that was there, no or minimal research was on the South African setting. And I guess it tried to close that gap, but I still feel there's even more to learn, because the challenges are unique.
Okay. I guess something that I find unique about your research is you had 413 questionnaires. Why was 413 the right number? How did you get to that? Because some people have 13, some people have 7. You've got 413. Why?
Okay. Well, Ash, I I don't have the thesis with me right now, so I'll try and answer you from my head. We were trying to get a number that would represent the Gauteng total community. Now, the total community of Gauteng was something million. I don't want to put a figure on it, but it was millions of people.
Something million. We'll go with that.
We couldn't analyze data or we couldn't collect data for 1 million people, but we had to get a statistically significant number. So sat down with the statistician, did some statistical calculations, and we came up with a number. I think it was 384, if I'm not mistaken. However, the responses exceeded the number.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm just going to ask a few general questions, but I think we've gone past our time. Thank you so much for all your knowledge. I guess, you know, something that you started with, which was being from Soweto, I relate to this research. So I'm thinking of somebody who's coming from, you know, Soweto, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, etc. You know, just to pick on a few places. What advice do you have for them when they're probably sat there going, oh my gosh, load shedding again? I do want to go down this path, you know, in terms of research, but I'm looking at the current, you know, situ. I can't see any greener pastures. What advice do you have for them?
I would say, okay, I would say vote wisely.
How does one vote wisely? Like, that's so vague. How do you
uh,
vote wisely? You've
I,
seen
I
men
guess,
that
yeah,
talk about the change. You know, you've seen them. So I think you need to be specific
okay.
because we all know how politicians are.
Yeah, I think currently our caliber of politicians is the bar is very low. You know, I myself can wake up tomorrow and become a president. You know, it's not rocket science according to the narrative that's there today. You know, however, I feel like to be honest, half of the things that are happening, we as a people, we also have a hand in it, um, as much as the government does. So we look at politicians. Politicians are politicians at the end of the day, and if they are not being held accountable, then just like the broken windows theory says, if you don't solve a problem while it's still small, then it will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you have no control. So that's basically what the broken windows theory is saying. Now, we have problems that were small. We saw the problems 10 years ago. We saw the problems 20 years ago, but we still kept on living the problem, And it's funny because we shouldn't have. One politician actually said in a meeting 10 years ago that he's celebrating the end of load shedding, But today, I guess we have stage 4. It's now stage 4, 5, 6. That's where we are now. But it seems like there's generally no plan for that in terms of the government. However, with the caliber of South Africans and colleagues and friends and stuff, the people that I've come to know in my journey, we do have capable people in South Africa. They just not in the right space. So we have what we call the government, and we have capable people. We need to merge that and create one body. you know, because I don't believe the level of what's happening represents us all. It does represent a few elite, but it doesn't represent us all. So I do believe there's a lot of capable people. I do believe there's a lot of people who are quite knowledgeable and quite competent in what they do. And if we can have them being the leaders and shaping them to be the ones that actually take over, I guess load shedding could end tomorrow. Violence could end the next day. It's not impossible. It's just a lack of political will, you know. But we all know the political will is based on other things and not the things that they should be doing.
Food for thought. I guess the final question, you'll be glad to know, is, in your opinion, do you think that going down the education path and MSc, BA, postgraduate, PhD, MPhil, postdoc, just to name a few, do you think that breaks the poverty cycle and it enables you to have a better future, or do you think it's void, it doesn't apply if you come from certain parts of the world?
I think yes, I do think it does break the void. I do think it's a solution. I guess I'm a living testimony that it does break the cycle of poverty. The other thing is that we always say that education is not only about learning your subject matter, but it's also about growing your brain or your mindset, but elevating the way you think is quite important, because you cannot be able to read contracts, you cannot be able to read this and that if you don't have education. People are people are being scammed here, people are being that, and we can also blame education for that, it brings about logic, or it improves the way you think. However, with regards to the cycle of poverty, I can say being raised by a single mother, it was something that really got me where I am today. And I feel that it will actually break the cycle with regards to the generations that come after me. They won't have to start where I started.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time today and for discussing your research, and also for the 3-minute pitch. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Very insightful. And if you would love to know more about Dr. Tshikani Khoza's research, please do get in contact. All the details are at the bottom. Any conferences that he'll be attending and you want to go and say hello, literally all the info is at the bottom. Remember, hashtag project dissemination to the world, hashtag sustainable knowledge to the world. Let us share in love and in peace. Remember, these are just our words. It's just a discussion. It's not a reflection of any constitution. However, we just have suggestions and opinions, essentially. So thank you again, Tshikani.
Thank you, Noma, for the time.